Okay. First of all, Ted, I just want to, I want, everyone kind of knows who you are, but I put together a little introduction for you. Obviously, Ted is one of the trainers for the 3-week yoga retreat. But I did some research on you, and he really is, he's a yoga teacher. He's been teaching yoga for over 10 years. He is a fitness trainer. He's an endurance athlete. Like, are you one of those runners that runs in the heat, like 110 degrees? Do you run in the desert? Is that what an endurance?
Endurance athlete just means going a long distance.
Long distance. Okay, like 100. Yeah.
100 miles, right?
Wow.
So running, biking, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So your daughter might have that in her blood. It might
That's
be in
right.
her genetics, right?
True.
He's an entrepreneur. He's an avid traveler, philanthropist. He's a loving father, a loving husband. He's a former elite adventure racer. He played lacrosse at UCLA. He's the founder of Adventure Yoga Retreats, which sounds so awesome. It's a company that organizes premium travel adventures that enriches lives and inspire people to perform at their highest level. I thought, wow, that's awesome. He's a co-creator and featured in Tony Horton's P90X2 yoga sequence. He is the designated yoga teacher for the Tour de France, winning professional cycling BMC racing team, and he's got his own yoga series on Exercise TV. So you have quite the resume, Ted, and I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And I'm going to let Ted talk, but I guess tonight he's going to be talking about nutrition and, you know, maybe some ways that, you know, maybe there's a lot of myths out there and a lot of things that a lot of things that we read, and then the next day we read something else. So what are your thoughts on nutrition?
My thoughts?
Yeah.
So first, before I share my thoughts, I wanted to share with you guys something that I just found. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull it up here momentarily. This is a study. So there's an organization called, let's see, stand by, Food Insight. And Laura, we can put a link to this later, but it's basically the International Food Information Council, essentially. And it's Food Insight, INSIGHT.org. Mm-hmm. So they just came out with this release about nutrition information. And the title is Nutrition Information Abounds, but Many Doubt Food Choices. Okay. So some of the highlights basically are that, what was I reading here? 8 of 10 people surveyed. So they surveyed 1,002 people, which gives you in research and science, that gives you basically a microcosm of the whole macrocosm of that's enough people to give you, to say X% of the country does whatever. So 8 in 10 people, 78%, say that they encounter a lot of conflicting information about what to eat and what to avoid, okay? More than half of those people, 56%, say that the conflicting information makes them doubt the choices they make. I mean, it's like proof is in the pudding right here, right? So for me, first of all, you guys, thank you very much for having me. Laura, thanks for having me. I grew up in some of you guys near Long Island. I played lacrosse at William Floyd High School, exit 68 off the LIE. So that's my hometown. And now I live in Malibu, California. I don't know how I got here, but I do like it here. And now I use lacrosse balls for something different, for like foam rolling my situation, for my cramps and my soreness. But anyway, so for years I had, been an athlete. I ran my first marathon in 2000, and that was I grew up playing lacrosse and football and baseball, and then sort of just stayed fit. But then in 2000, I always say I got suckered into doing my first marathon. I had been doing yoga for a few years and only did yoga. Gave up running, gave up going to the gym and lifting weights or any kind of exercise. Then I felt like I wanted to add a little cardio. I love running, so I started doing that. And like I said, got suckered into doing this marathon. And that was in 2000. Then I did my first triathlon same year. Then the company that was putting on this little mini sprint, turns out it was Malibu Triathlon. And this little mini sprint triathlon was also putting on an adventure race. Adventure racing, if you don't know, is multi-sport, like a triathlon, swim, bike, run. Adventure racing is mountain biking, kayaking, trail running, but also navigation. So there's a team. You typically do it in teams of, 3 or 4 or 5, and everybody does the whole entire race. And the races will take you, like a sprint race will take 2 to 5 hours, and all the way up to, I don't know if some of you remember the Eco Challenge, which was a big race that was like 400 miles, and it would take 5 to 10 days to finish. And people would race through the night, and you'd basically sleep for 2 hours or whatever. So I never did anything that extreme, but I would do 2 to 3 day races. So we'd race through the night. We'd start at 6:30 in the morning and finish like at noon the next day. And you'd basically be going nonstop for hours and hours and hours. And so for me, back then, when I got into that, 2001, 2, 3, 4 in the marathon, I immediately thought, well, what I'm putting in my system is the fuel. So I have to start to become more aware of the fuel that I'm putting in my engine, right? My engine is my body, essentially, and that's what is going to propel me forward. And as an athlete, I wanted to make sure that I was utilizing the most efficient forms of food. Now, back then, that was 17 years ago, there's a book called The Triathlete's Training Bible, written by a guy named Joel Friel, who's kind of a famous triathlon coach from Boulder. And I remember going to the nutrition chapter. And the first sentence in the nutrition chapter basically says, "Welcome to the world of eating whatever you want." He's like, there's been nights where I've sat down and had a quart of ice cream, but I knew I was going to burn it off the next day. So long story short, that guy no longer thinks that way because he understands that all that sugar, even though you could take it in and yes, you could burn it off, it's going to turn into fat and give you a heart attack and increase your cholesterol. And it's just not a good thing to do. So back in the 70s, there was also a guy named Timothy Noakes, who's around still today, who wrote a book called The Lore of Running. That was all about carb loading. So we used to think about, the night before the race, you got to take in all this pasta and carb load, and then you go do a marathon or half marathon or whatever, and you're going to use that fuel. Well, turns out that's not really healthy for you either. And so what I know now, to sort of make this kind of very short, and this is my experience, and then I'm happy to kind of answer some questions from the 3-week yoga retreat. I got my copy of the Clean Eats book here. But so for me, when I turned 40, I'm 46 now. And when I turned 40, I thought, okay, well, it's time for me to get some blood work done. I haven't been to a doctor in 20 years. And, I basically take care of myself and always felt healthy, always felt energetic, and never really had any weight issues or anything like that. And I performed really well during races and stuff. And I would kind of dial in certain things, and I'd figure out what sports drinks I needed and all that. But when I turned 40, I thought, okay, it's time to get blood work, because even though I feel really good, I don't know, what's going on the inside. And my younger brother, I have 3 brothers, and one of them was diagnosed with cancer when he was 7 years old. So I know that something like that, he's fine now, by the way. He has 2 kids and survived, and he's okay. But he's a little bit of a punk, but that's a different story. No. So anyway, we just don't know, right? We didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden, he had leukemia, so it's a blood disorder. So I just always had that in the back of my head. And it took me, because I was probably in denial for a couple of years, it took me almost 3 years. I think my first round of blood tests was when I was 43. So 2014. My birthday is October 7th. So it was sometime in 2014 that I got this blood work done, and it was a functional medicine doctor. And she brought me in. And so she had a deal with a lab that's now called True Health Diagnostics. And they take your lipid panels. Your lipid panel is your LDL, HDL, triglycerides, all that sort of stuff. They take your LDL and then they break it down deeper. So typically, if you look at your cholesterol panel, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, that stuff, and your cholesterol's on the higher side, the doctor will just tell you, most doctors just say, oh, your cholesterol's a little bit high, we have to do something. Either you got to change your lifestyle and exercise and eat better, or they'll give you a statin. Statin is going to help decrease your cholesterol. The problem with statins are that, and we're finding this out more and more, that they're not really good for you in the long run. So I think they cause like stress, or they cause heart attacks, or I don't know. It's something's going on with statins that's not good. And I'm sure more research will come out about that. But anyway, my cholesterol was on the higher side, but it wasn't to the point, it wasn't like red. So the great thing about this particular lab is you'd have like a green number, a yellow number, or a red number. So it was good because you were like, oh, I'm in the yellow zone, so it's not panic now. I've got to change everything, but I can work on it. So most of my stuff was, I had a couple of red things, I had some yellow things, and I had some green things. And she said, I wouldn't, like if, and this is, she's an MD, but she left UCLA Medical. There was a little satellite UCLA Medical place here. She left there because they were just forcing her to see more patients. She's like, I can't treat anybody by seeing them for 5 minutes. How can I possibly treat someone? So she's moved on, started her own practice, and she's a functional medicine doctor. And so she'll actually go through these labs with you and spend like an hour, right? Which is unheard of. She's fantastic. And anyway, so she said, look, you have some inflammation. It's nothing to be alarmed about, but it is some things that we can change, because what it's showing is that you have some inflammation in your adipose tissue, which is fat tissue. And I'm like, wow, wait, if you look at me, you'd go, this guy, he's fit. Like, he doesn't have any fat on his body. But and then I started to look closer at what I was drinking and what I was eating. By the way, this is Cafe Latte Shakeology with a little green boost in my performance bottle, because I know you guys are Beachbody people, so I just figured don't tell anyone this is.
It better be.
The performance people might be upset that I'm putting Shakeology in the bottle, but this bottle is way better than the others. But shh, don't tell anyone. So anyway, point is that I was not actually having Beachbody. I've known Tony Horton for 10 years, but I wasn't really consistently taking Shakeology or using Beachbody. Beachbody Performance wasn't even around at this point. I was taking other supplements that will remain nameless at the moment. What I realized with these sport drinks that I was drinking and the way that I was eating is that I was overstimulating my pancreas. So to kind of boil this thing down, because there were a couple of questions of like, can I eat dairy was one of the questions in the Facebook group today. And another question was about menopausal women. That's a hormone situation. So that's a whole different thing. I don't know enough about hormones and how they change. I haven't quite hit menopause yet, so I don't know exactly really what happened. But I do know, actually, from teaching yoga, this is a total aside, that I have so many women, not so many, but I have a lot of women who come, they're going through menopause. And my class gets warm, it gets hot. You're sweating in class. I try to challenge people. And some women who happen to be going through menopause would be like, I'm dying. I'm having a hot flash. I have to go outside. So it's, I don't mean to laugh, because I'm not ever going to experience that. But I understand. And my wife actually is reading a book. She would know more. My wife is a health coach and a chef, a healthy chef. She's got a blog that's fantastic. You should definitely link to her blog. But she's a resource, probably more for that, for the hormone situation. But the ultimate point I'll get to, I think, will cover menopausal women along with everyone else. But anyway, so back to what I was doing. So what I was doing essentially on a run was, let's say I was going for a big 10.5 mile run across the street from my house. There's a whole bunch of hills. I love them. They're great. If you find me on Instagram, you'll see all the trails out there. And I would have a bowl of oatmeal and a banana, and then that would be my fuel for the run. And then I wait about an hour, and then I go do a nice long 2-hour run, or whatever it was, hour and a half. And if I'm going for 45 minutes or even an hour, I won't eat beforehand. But if I'm going for longer than that, 45 minutes, then I'll want to eat. At least this used to be the way. So I'd have my oatmeal, my banana, and then wait, like I said, about an hour. And then that would be enough time for me to digest, because I'd start the run slower. Then I'd have a pre-energizer workout drink, like the Beachbody Performance Energize. And although the Beachbody Performance Energize, and this is not a commercial for Beachbody, but it could be, is much far superior product than what I was taking. And I do use the Beachbody Performance Energize before my workouts, not before yoga, because I don't think you need it before yoga, but definitely before, like Monday night, I'm still sore. We were all at Tony's house doing plyometrics, and I had it before that because it's like a much bigger, stronger, harder workout. Before my runs, before a big bike ride, that kind of thing, I'll for sure have it. Anyway, so my previous drink, I would have my oatmeal, my banana, then I'd have my drink, then I'd go run. During the run, I'd stop and have a gel, and one of those little sport gels. And then I'd finish the run, and then I'd have a recovery drink. Not like the Beachbody Performance Recover. I'd have first a muscle recovery drink, then I'd have something similar to the Beachbody Performance Recover. Then I'd have lunch, right? So all this is happening in the first few hours of the day. And what I learned after I got my blood work back, now that all seems good, healthy, right? It's just a few sport drinks. I'm working hard. I'm doing my thing. I'm having oatmeal, a banana. Then I'm having a nice big salad for lunch and a protein shake. Shouldn't be a problem. But the issue is that your pancreas can only process about 50 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per sitting or per hour, essentially. So your pancreas, just to kind of back up a little bit, sorry for the birds, but the pancreas is what secretes insulin. Okay, so you take food in, and your blood sugar starts to raise. Well, the pancreas, so the insulin, glucose levels go up. So your insulin, the pancreas secretes insulin to help stabilize your blood sugar. Because if your blood sugar goes too high, you start to get the shakes, and it's bad for you. If your blood sugar goes too low, then you can die essentially of a diabetic coma. So people who have type 1, so there's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Just quickly, type 1 people don't have a properly functioning pancreas. So they have to have insulin injections. There's like a little patch thing that they have, a Dexcom that they have on their arm or their hip or wherever it is. And that actually Bluetooths to their phone. And then they can see every 5 minutes, they get a data point of where their blood is, their blood glucose level. So they can monitor it and then take a little bit of juice or whatever they need to keep. That's type 1 diabetes. Type 2 people have just totally, demolished their pancreas from over sugaring themselves, that they get type 2 diabetes. And that's way more controllable and reversible, whereas type 1 is not. Type 1 is something that you're born with, and it's just the way it is, and you have to really monitor it. But anyway, what we know in science is that your pancreas can only really handle about 50 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour, let's say per sitting, okay? That's for the quote unquote normal human being. It's not for everyone, but in general, for me, based on my genetics, I really should only be having about 30 grams per sitting. I don't even do that. But on a rare case, I'll do that. Like last night, probably. But we were at a friend's birthday dinner, and they made like a lentil soup with potatoes, and then a big honking thing of quinoa with beautiful roasted vegetables, and then a big cake. And I had to get rid of most of the quinoa. I had to not have the potatoes, and I had like a bite or two of the cake. So that's kind of my solution in a group situation like that. Anyway, back to the pancreas and what's actually happening. So think about this, back to my run. If I had my oatmeal, that's 30-ish grams of carbohydrate. And I threw a banana on top, that's about 30 to 35. I can't have anything else. So if I eat that hour and then I have that drink that I was having had about 15. So if I have it within the hour, I'm overstimulating my pancreas. When you overstimulate your pancreas on a regular basis throughout the day because you're having sugary drinks and coffee and soda and too much bread and French fries and all this crap, what happens is your pancreas says, screw you, I'm done. Because the pancreas secretes the insulin and the body doesn't adjust. So the pancreas finally says, well, I'm getting more carbohydrates. I'm giving you more insulin. I'm trying to stabilize. You're giving me more carbohydrates. I'm giving you more insulin. I'm trying to stabilize. And then finally the pancreas, think about it as like a bunch of grapes, becomes a bunch of raisins. And that is what's called type 2 diabetes. So that's really important to understand, because most people in this country, in our world, live on carbohydrates. So we're going from a macro level. So you have macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. That's macro, big picture, right? Micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, right? Stuff you get from superfoods. Oh, guess what? By the way, Shakeology's stocked full of micronutrients and really good stuff. So that's a cool thing. And most flavors, because I look at this stuff, most flavors have about 14 to 18 grams per serving of carbohydrates. So that's fine for me. I'll have this. It's now 3:22 my time. We started at 3 o'clock. I've had a couple sips. By the time this will take me an hour, hour and a half. Like maximum, I'll have one of these in an hour, and that's fine. I can handle that, no problem. So anyway, macro, and you got your carbohydrates, you got your insulin. And what you have to be careful of is understanding. So I used to work at this wellness retreat place. And in the afternoon, I'd go and I'd pick up a nice bag of corn chips. And I think, oh, corn chips are healthy. It's just corn and some lime and some salt. And then I'd have an Arizona lemonade. An Arizona lemonade has like 70 grams of sugar or something like this, grams of carbs. And those little Hava chips that I thought were healthy had 44 grams. So that's 115, 110 grams of carbohydrates on my drive, which is 15 minutes from my house to that wellness retreat center, thinking, oh, it's just an afternoon snack, no big deal, just a nice cold iced tea and potato chip and corn chips, right? Better than potato chips, probably the same. Anyway, I was killing myself essentially. And that's what is hard, I think, for people to understand. And that's why it's no surprise to me that there's a study that says 8 in 10 people are confused, because there's so much information. You can do paleo, you can do vegan, you can do whatever. There's all kinds of different things. And then when there's pescatarian. When I was when I learned about food in 9th grade, there was no such thing as being a pescatarian, right? It was like you're either a vegetarian or you a carnivore. There was a lacto-ovo vegetarian and there was ovo vegetarian, so you ate dairy. But anyway, so I digress for a second. So the point is, I think the biggest thing, and this is why I spend this much time on it, is I really feel like it's important to understand the macro side first. And when to just bring it back to my blood work, so we showed higher cholesterol levels, we showed higher triglyceride levels. HDL was not as good as it could be. I got super strict because my wife basically gave me an ultimatum. She said, look, I don't want to bring a kid into this world knowing that the dad is going to get diabetes. And that was hardcore. I was like, wait a second, what do you mean? Like, I'm like a Mr. Cool guy, I'm like, I'm fine. I've never seen a doctor. And the bottom line is she hit the nail right on the head. She's like, I'm not willing to bring someone into this world whose dad might die in a few years. And I was like, all right, I got to do this. And by the way, I would also have like Starbucks chai tea. I would never do a unicorn. That's crazy. The Starbucks unicorn is crazy. But a Starbucks chai tea, which was like chai, and I get it with almond milk or soy milk or whatever, probably sweetened from Starbucks. Then the chai itself was that stuff. And there must be 50 grams of carbohydrates in there. So just as another scale, when you think about carbohydrates, when I say that in the world of a drink, so let's say there's 50 grams of carbohydrates in that Starbucks chai tea. I think it's like 4.5 grams or 4.2 grams or something like that of carbohydrates equals 1 teaspoon of sugar. Okay. So think about that for a second. If you had a drink that was your afternoon Starbucks chai tea, and there were 50 grams of carbohydrates, sugar in there, that would be 12, almost 13 teaspoons of sugar. Okay. So there's no way any of us would ever put 13 teaspoons of sugar into any drink that was not sweetened. I mean, right? There's no way anybody would do that. So this is the other thing where it's really tricky when it comes to fruit, which was another question asked earlier on the post. So it gets tricky because, wait, I had a thought before I was going to go to the fruit. And now I totally forget what it was about the teaspoons. Oh yeah. So you're lucky if you put like 2, like in a coffee. I'll put 1 or 2 in a coffee if I'm going to have coffee. But anyway, so regarding fruit, you have to really look at, I look at the carbohydrate content. That's what I look at first. So I actually have a little list inside of my cabinet that shows me how much carbohydrates there are for each particular thing. And Laura, if you want, I can find that if you just remind me and find that in my notes, and I can send it, and we can like post it in the group. I'm sure it's a PDF I got from the lab, and it's really great because it gives you vegetables and fruits and how much. Like mangoes, stop great. Having mangoes. I don't do bananas. I haven't had a banana in 2 years. I don't do mangoes. I do berries. I do blueberries. I do strawberries. Like a half a cup or a cup of strawberries is like 4 grams of carbohydrates. And it's just like the blueberries are, so there's something called resveratrol. Some of you may have heard of resveratrol. It's good for aging. And everybody was like, oh my God, I'm going to drink my red wine because red wine has resveratrol in it, and it's going to help me age better. Well, blueberries have like 4 times the amount or some crazy number. It's like way more resveratrol in blueberries than there are in red wine. So I'd say lay off the red wine and have blueberries instead. But anyway, so regarding fruits, it's deceiving because you want to make sure you're having the proper amount of fruits. Now, the proper fruits, you don't want to overstimulate the pancreas, right? I think that's the biggest thing for me. So, and this goes back to linking it all together for the question about menopausal women. The most important thing that we all understand, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is that we are all an experiment of one. What's going to work for me may not work for you. And that's why I think this is great, right? If you look at this book, like some of these recipes are fantastic. First of all, I don't eat chicken. And so this is funny. And I remember that they made this when we were kind of like designing the whole thing, and they were like, "Hey, you guys, we want you guys to pick a recipe, and we'll put it in here, and we'll name it after you." And then I gave them like a dry or like a roasted veggie salad, and I'm not even sure if it's in here. But at one point before this actually came out, they oh yeah, here it is, the Ted Power. So they made it salmon. They made it a salmon dish, but initially it was a chicken salad. I was like, guys, I don't eat chicken. What are you going to do? So there's still a chicken salad in here. But anyway, I think all this stuff is really well balanced. So I think it's great. What I would say is you just have to be careful, in my opinion, about doing the carbohydrate things. So there's something, have you guys heard about 23andMe? People heard about 23andMe? It's that genetic testing. So my wife and I just sent it in a while back, and we haven't received the information yet. This takes 6 to 8 weeks, but basically you spit in a little vial, and then you send it off, and then they give you your DNA. They basically kind of map your genome essentially. Excuse me, and it tells you what you might be predisposed with, and they'll tell you if you have the gene that makes you predisposed to Alzheimer's or heart disease or stroke or whatever it is. And I already know, because that blood work, when I did that initial blood work, we also did a genetic test for ApoE. So apolipoprotein E, there's apolipoprotein little a, there's apolipoprotein B. This is all when you take your LDL and HDL and cholesterol. You take the LDL and you break it down 8 different particles. So they could have named them different things, but they decided to just change the back number. So the ApoE, you might hear about if you start doing some research here, is a genetic marker essentially that has different alleles, so that you get one from your mom, one from your dad. So 2 or 3 or 4. So you can be a 2-2, or you can be a 2-3, or you could be a 3-3, or you could be a 3-4, or you could be a 4-4. it used to be that if you were a 4-4, you were a ticking time bomb. You were basically for sure going to get Alzheimer's, if not drop dead by the time you were 50. And that's what they showed, that, people who are like, oh my God, the guy just died. He was in great shape, 52 years old. He just dropped dead. He probably had, or she probably had, this genetic thing. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen, but I am a 3-4. So that means I have a predisposition for heart disease and Alzheimer's. So I have to be super aware of that. So of course, I get the blood work done. It shows I have some higher cholesterol. It shows that I have this genetic marker. And thankfully, there's science that shows just because you have that. And by the way, here's another great little talk. There's a TED Talk that just came out. So the TED conference, I'm sure you guys have listened to TED Talks, just happened a month ago in Vancouver. If you remember a movie a year ago or 2 years ago called Still Alice, was about a woman, I think it was Julianne Moore, who she was a woman who got Alzheimer's. And so the woman who wrote that book, Still Alice, did a TED Talk about how to prevent Alzheimer's. And it's a fascinating TED Talk. So Laura, if you want, we can put a link to that as well. But anyway, so just because, and she mentions a study about nuns who happen to have some sort of, gray matter, or some sort of indicator in the brain that showed that they should actually have Alzheimer's, but they didn't have it. So one of the things that they say is like having community and having a purpose in life is one of the things to actually help you prevent Alzheimer's. And obviously exercise and eating right and all this kind of stuff. So for me, I have to look at this information and I have to act accordingly. Thankfully, my doctor said, look, you can change this by your lifestyle. So you got to start looking at what sugars you're taking in, start going on to a more low carb diet, start going into a more high fat diet. And so, of course, as the proactive person I am, I started doing all the research and reading all the books and figuring all of this stuff out. And I stopped having oatmeal, stopped having bananas, got rid of all those sport drinks that I was doing. This happened to coincide with my, I was already kind of doing this. And then we started doing the 3-week yoga retreat. That was, I guess we shot it a year ago. Wow, that's so crazy. So I had done this already. I was already in my low carb phase, and I remember on set actually talking to people at lunchtime, and they're having like big sandwiches, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really do bread anymore. So bread, I'll have like a little bite of bread as a vehicle for butter because it's good fat, the butter, right? And we eventually, so your body adjusts. I lost a few pounds and then sort of, came back to my normal weight, which is like 175, 178. On a rare case, I'll get down to 172 or 3 or 180, 181. And for me, it's just, whatever it is. And I had my body fat tested, my body composition tested. And I thought, well, I don't know. I had no idea really like what's healthy or what's not healthy. And I went with my friend and he's like, you're going to be way leaner than me. I'm like, no, this guy's a little skinny twig guy. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm sure you're going to be way leaner than me. So they print out we did a bod pod, which is like the spaceship thing that they put you in. And you got like just a pair of underwear on, your hat is in a cap. It's essentially air displacement. So they can tell whether you have fat or bone structure or skin or whatever it is. And he looks at the thing and he's like, wow. He's like, are you training for something? And I was like, well, not really. I mean, I'm always well trained. And if I decide to do a race, I'll just train up for it. He's like, yeah, man. He's like, you're 5.5% body fat. He's like, you shouldn't be he's like, this is what you would want as an athlete, like basically to be in competition at that point. And it wasn't because I was training. It was because I had been on this. I mean, yes, I was doing my normal training, but it's because I had been eating this way for a year and a half. And the body just learns to burn fat a certain way. Now, obviously for women, it's different. Just as a like for men, you don't want to go under 5% or under 4% or so. That's unhealthy. So 5 to like 15% is where you want to be as an athlete for a man. For a woman, I think it's like 15 to 25%. So just for, right. So that's like elite woman is like athletes that look like they have no body fat, they're still 15 to 25% body fat, just for a gauge. But anyway, so I was really happy about the fact that I really wasn't doing that much except changing my diet to have this great result. So that's kind of my sort of big, like, overall story of how I got to be where I am now. Oh, one final thing is that I did those first tests in 2014. I kind of didn't really do much until 2015, or what was it, 2013? I forget. Anyway, it was 2014, I think, that I started to like really go on the diet in the end of 2014. And I got the test again in 2015, and things dropped. Like the cholesterol came down, LDL dropped like 10 or 12%, I forget. HDL went up 10%, and the triglycerides went down 10 or 12%. So like, and then the following year, same thing. The bad stuff went down, it got better. The good stuff went up. So LDL was bad, it went down, perfect. HDL went up. Triglycerides, bad, you want them to go down. And all that was happening only because I started watching my carbohydrate intake. Now, most of what I eat is vegetables. I do eat eggs, and I do eat fish once in a while. I don't do chicken or red meat at all, but I haven't done that in 15 years, or more probably. And we could go into a whole story about that, but we don't have to now. So anyway, that's just kind of how I got to where I am with what I eat. And so I would say I'm mostly vegetarian, and fish maybe now probably 2 to 3 times a month, depending. And we usually don't cook fish in the house. So we're always eating vegetarian in the house. Eggs, there's eggs in the house. But if we go out, I'll eat and I'll have a nice piece of salmon or something like that. And then dessert-wise, I don't really do desserts anymore. I'll have a nice piece of dark chocolate. And dark chocolate is kind of my treat to myself that I'll have. And there's a brand, you can get it at Whole Foods. It's Green and Black's 85% dark chocolate. So it's really bitter, and anything I think above 73% is really the healthier chocolate. So next time you're going to go have some chocolate, and look at how much it. Don't have any milk chocolate. Just go to dark chocolate, and then make sure it's above 73% cacao. That's kind of what you want there. So anyway, things were looking up for me, and they continue. I haven't tested this year. I'm going to do a test soon, and look forward to seeing those results. I would imagine to be the same. I'd be very surprised if it either would stabilize or continue to get better. So anyway, that's kind of for me what's been happening and over the last few years, and why I have a very specific case. So my recommendation would be, first, you can start having more vegetables. Like this, my wife wrote a book called The 14-Day Nutrition Reset. And she is like 30 different vegan recipes in there. And one of the concepts that she talks about in the book is crowding out bad stuff. She's like, I'm not telling anybody to take away anything, because then all of a sudden you get into this like, well, I want my food. No, you can't have your food. I want my food, right? And so she said, instead, just start eating more good stuff. And as you fill up on good stuff, then maybe the bad stuff will start to go away. That's one thing. Another thing is nowadays there's a lot of talk about intermittent fasting. So I've learned a lot more of this over the last few months. And one thing that I would say is, if you can get your eating within 12 hours or lower per day. So for instance, if you wake up in the morning and you have a coffee first thing, I don't recommend that because it's too acidic. I'll have water first thing, and then I'll have some tea. And then I'll usually, if I'm going to have a coffee, it'll be in the afternoon, like around like noon or 1 or something like that. And I sip it for a couple hours. But anyway, so my recommendation is that you limit your food intake, including drinks if you can, but at least solid food to 12 to 10 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours a day. Meaning, like, if you get up and you had breakfast at 8, you can eat dinner at 6, but don't eat again, or eat dinner 6 or 7, right? Don't eat again hours. And there's a lot of science behind this. And because what they're showing is that when you do a longer fast, intermittent fasting, essentially it sort of kills off a lot of the bacteria. So it's actually, what used to happen back in the day, years ago, was that we would have a bunch of food and then we wouldn't have food for a week or more. And the body would fight off everything. And then you'd start to feed it again and it would kind of rebuild. So that same process happens. And if you do this intermittent fasting, supposedly that happens. I like how I feel when I don't eat very much. There's also calorie restriction is a lot. And I'm not saying to force yourself to eat little. And I don't like feeling strained. But if you can just kind of train yourself, think about that. Think about training. If you can train yourself to just kind of eat less, and I bet we'd all be fine if we ate 30% less than actually what we take in. That's for sure. So those two things crowd out the bad stuff with good stuff. And then if you can limit your intake, your eating, and this is except for water, but just within 10 to 12 hours each day. So it's a little bit tricky. I mean, it takes effort to do that because you have to finish dinner early or you have to not have breakfast and sometimes skip breakfast. But those are two things, and obviously more organic and more veggies best. But that's it, I think, for me at the moment. But I'm happy to answer questions. So just to answer the questions I know that were there, the menopausal thing is a hormonal thing, so I can't really speak to that specifically. The only thing I can say is maybe do a little bit of research and figure out what works for you, because if those women who go through menopause, it's, certain things are gonna work that didn't work before, and certain things may not work that used to work. So it's really this kind of, we're all like a living experiment. So the only thing I can say is if something triggers you, or you feel like something like wakes you up and you're trying to go to sleep, obviously don't do that the next day. I mean, that's, I'm sorry, I don't have any more specific information, but think of yourself as an experiment, right? That's one thing. And then the dairy question, I'm okay with dairy. We don't really do any whole milk or 2% milk. We do almond milk or coconut milk here in the house. I will in my coffee put a little half and half. So I just have a little kind of splash of that. I'm okay with dairy if it's from a decent source because there's fat in there. So ultimately, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but there's plenty of research out there that just says good fats are good. Oil, like olive oil, and nuts and seeds and avocados, like those are all good things to eat, even cashews, right? Even though they're chock full of calories and fat, they're still good because ultimately you want your body to sort of burn fat. You don't want to completely be reliant on the carbohydrates all the time, because then you'll crash if you don't have them. But if you're relying on the fat, then it's okay because you can go all day. Like the fact that I have 5.5% body fat means at 178 pounds, let's just say 180 basically, that means I have 9 pounds of fat. Think about that. If you held a whole big ball of fat in your hands and it was 9 pounds, that's what I have on my body. You're like, where the heck is all that? But it's in there because if you like slice through the muscle, you see the little white layers of like fat. That's fat. So it adds up over time. So there's plenty of fuel to get when if you're going to start burning fat. So you just lower that carbohydrate intake and move over. So I'm okay with some dairy as long as it comes from a good source, not like, steroid pumped cows and all that sort of stuff. So if you can get some organic stuff, that's probably better. And then the fruit thing we went through, I would say stick to berries. Those were the 3 questions that I saw. Happy to answer any others if there are any.
Okay. Does anyone? I just wanted to make an observation. I did the 3-week yoga retreat. This is my 3rd round, and I don't know if it was the lack of dairy or eating so many vegetables or stopping. I noticed my body leaned down like dramatic, and like what you were just saying, like you stopped. You started limiting your carbs. You started eating differently, and I noticed a difference in my body within like 9 weeks. Like
yeah.
difference, especially my midsection, which I never thought. I had 2 kids. I'm 48. I just thought, oh, it is.
Yeah.
But I did see a big difference in my midsection.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure, that's amazing. Congratulations. Right? It's to me, here's another thing. It's funny because I remember watching you guys do the 3-week yoga retreat test group, and we've had obviously thousands of people do the program already, but it was fun to watch you guys go through the whole experience and to watch the amount of people who were losing weight, because you would never think that doing 30 minutes of yoga is, especially like Venus's week, is not that tough, right? I mean, Faith's it's not like a big workout where you're like sweating, I mean, Elise is a little bit more challenging, and then mine is a little bit more challenging, but still, it's not like you're like doing 22-minute hardcore, or insanity, or right? I mean, it's just. But the bottom line is, it's what the truth is you can't exercise away a bad diet. It doesn't really, it's so much more diet than it is exercise. The fact that you're paying attention and moving for a half an hour a day is great. But what's way more important is the diet. Excuse me. And that's why 8 of 10 people are confused. And that's why it's so hard, because people think, oh, if I exercise, I think, you think of it this way, exercise is only going to get you to a place where you're more aware, and then you still have to actually make the choices and the decisions to eat better.
Does anyone else have any questions? Anyone?
You know what was the name of your wife's blog and the name of her book?
Oh yeah, so her blog is called delectableyou.com. delectableyou.com, and her book is on there. It's called The 14-Day Nutrition Reset. It's an ebook. It's actually a big file, so if you decide to get it, I think it's like $10 or something, but if you decide to get it, give it a minute to download, because we haven't made it the smaller file yet. So, but there's some great recipes in there, and she's a great writer, and her blog, you just totally follow her blog. It's recipes for food and for life. And so she always has some, and since we had Madison, she has what's called diastasis. I don't know, diastasis recti. I don't know if some of you guys know that. It's when you have a baby, for most women, the abdomen splits in half. Yeah. And I think it's like 70% of women, after the baby comes out, the abdomen goes back and it comes back together. The two, so you have your abdomen and then it splits, right? Because the baby comes out that way. And the two sides of the abdomen come back and they work together as one. And then for 30% of the people, it doesn't actually come back. Mm-hmm. And she had a very extreme case. She's kind of petite, and the baby basically went straight out. You know how some women have kind of, I think they say like boys are kind of rest a little higher, girls a little lower, or whatever. Anyway, Madison basically went straight out. So her abdomen split, and she's been dealing for the last 14 months still. So anyway, she writes all about, whatever she's going through. It's really brilliant. I love her, obviously. She's my wife, but but some of the stuff is great. So anyway, check it out, and delectableyou.com.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And she has a YouTube channel, which sorry. You'll see if you follow.
I'm sorry.
No. She does all these little videos. I'm her cameraman. So she does all these little recipes. So there's tons of little videos that she has on different recipes. And I'm the guy in the back behind the camera. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. What was that?
Christina?
I was a quick question about the fruit. Where do the grapes fall in the carb thing? Are grapes high in carbs? Yeah,
they are. You know what? There's actually a great, it's a bummer. You can definitely, it's funny, I recognize that accent.
There's a lot of them on this call.
New Yorker, yes.
I love it. Let's see, so I'm typing this into Google. How many carbs are in grapes? And then it immediately shows you this kind of very cool thing. I don't know if you can see that, but this is a very cool sort of graph, right? And it's like 6, and then you can even change the thing. So it says grapes, 1 cup has 16 grams. So for me, I'd say, okay, 16 grams, 1 cup, but that's probably, 12 grapes. So if you were going to have a dinner, and it was going to be pasta. And like, let's say you're going to have pasta primavera, and you're going to have, so you've already probably up there in the carbohydrate content. And then you're like, well, I'm going to be good. I'm just going to have grapes for dessert. And you might be over. But if you had like salmon and salad, and then you want to have grapes, go for it, right? Because you haven't had any carbs in the salmon or the salad. So I would say, they're fine. Just don't do dried fruit. So raisins are dried grapes.
Right.
They're like off the charts. A dried apricot. I used to have, I think it was apricot or dried mangoes from Costco. They have this bag of dried mangoes from Costco, and they're through the roof. It's like 37 grams of carbs for like a serving, which is like one bite. I used to like wolf down.
So good.
So good, right? It's like, I mean, it's crazy.
Like crack. I can't have it.
Yeah, exactly. I now, even still, when I go to Costco, I'm bummed that I can't eat those. So bad.
They're delicious. But we're going to stay away from them. No more mango.
Yeah.
Just berries. Berries and apples, right? Apples are good. Apples.
Diana said, sorry, go ahead. So so Diana's asking in the chat room over there, back to carbs, do you not eat oatmeal either? No, Diana, I stopped.
Okay.
So I could. So now I could go and have a bowl of oatmeal. If I was going to, I'd have steel cut oats, and I'd probably make sure that my serving was just of like whatever it is, half a cup or a cup of cooked or whatever it was, to get those 30 grams. But I wouldn't put a banana. I wouldn't do oatmeal and banana. That's what I used to do, and that would be overstimulating for me. For me, I don't ever want to, sorry, I got a little bug on my thing. I don't ever want to go over, if I can help it. If I can help it, I want to try to stay around 30 grams per meal if I can. And so here's another quick tip. It's basically, if you think about, if you do 0 to 50 grams of carbohydrates per day, you'll go into a state of ketosis, right? That's like, if you might hear about ketogenic diet. If you do between 50 and 100 grams of carbs per day, that's weight loss. So you'll lose weight if you're in between 50 to 100 grams of carbs. If you're between 100 and 150 grams of carbs, that's like maintenance. So you're probably, you might lose weight, but depending on what you were eating before, you might lose weight. If you were used to doing 250 or 300 grams a day, then for sure 100, 150 is going to help you lose weight. But that's where I try to stay. I try to stay somewhere between 75 and 150, unless I'm exercising a lot, in which case then I allow myself a little bit more. So, and when I say exercising a lot, I mean minimum 2 hours of like a hard run, or if I was doing a half marathon or a marathon, I'll allow myself like a little bit more throughout the day to help my recovery.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
There's been a lot. Well, first of all, a lot of us on the call have been following the Portion Fix meal plan. One of the things that's been on my mind for a few months, and I just can't figure out how to transition, is I feel like there's not enough healthy fats for long-term health. I think it's good for weight loss, but I have some people who are now on maintenance, and how to transition them to eating more healthy fats. Is there a certain amount that you look for every day, or?
I haven't gotten to the point where I feel like I'm over fatting myself. Like, I know that's a weird term, but I feel like as long I try to do an avocado a day, in my salad and dinner. It's like half for my salad, half for my dinner. Usually I'm having a salad a day usually. So I'm making sure that I'm putting my olive oil on the salad. And then honestly, my snack is nuts. So I really get a lot from the nuts, and that allows me to not be hungry. I don't feel like I go hungry because I just have a few nuts. And I think the big thing with nuts I'm learning is that if you get them off the shelf and they're salted, there can be a lot of salt. So if you go to like Trader Joe's or something like that, you can get, anywhere you can find them in a bag that are just raw nuts. So I like the salt sometimes. It's just a nice taste. I don't mind it, but I'll dilute it. So if I get a bag with salt, I'll get 2 raw bags, mix them all up, And then that helps me. So I'm not as much salt, but I still get my fat content.
And then what are your thoughts on the ketogenic diet? Because that's like the buzzword right now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So there's a couple books that I'll recommend. And this helped me when I transitioned, because I did go in and out of ketosis a little bit, and I wasn't tracking it. I wasn't measuring my ketones, but you can get a little breathalyzer thing to measure your ketone production. And I just know, because my breath stank, and because I knew what I was taking in. So I knew for sure I was under 50 grams. But there's two doctors that have written two great books. One, it's Doctors Volek, Volek, and Phinney. I think it's Phinney. And the books are The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living and The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance. So I think that, so I bought both, but I read the Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance, because I was an athlete. I am an athlete, and I was much more concerned about that. Those two guys are in ketosis. They wrote that, and they stay in it forever. All the recipes in there are much more along the lines of kind of Atkins, where you're kind of higher on the protein and super, super low, obviously, on the carbohydrates, and way high on the fat. For me, what I find it just has been better, because frankly, I just don't want to limit. Like, I like having a little quinoa if I want a little quinoa, or I don't mind, this. I wouldn't really be having Shakeology if I was in ketosis, because that's 18 grams. Like, that would be it. Otherwise, that would pretty much be it. So for me, I mean, it's, again, I think that goes back to, we're an experiment of one. And if you wanted to give it a try, see how it felt for you. I will say that there's more and more science coming out about how great the ketogenic diet is for, things like, from like autism to multiple sclerosis to all kinds of, to cancer, to all kinds of things. There's a study that showed that a 5-day fast, and not no food at all, but it's like very, very, very limited, helped cancer patients with their chemo. So they actually assimilated the chemo way better if they fasted for 5 days before. So there's a lot of science coming out about stuff like that. There's a doctor named Valter, Valter is his first name, Longo, Longo. He's a researcher at USC, and he created this 3-day or 5-day fast called L Nutra. I think the website is the letter L dash Nutra, Nutra.com. And that's like, you can only get this if a doctor prescribes it to you, but it's basically you'd be in a state of ketosis for sure. So for me specifically, I'm not necessary. Maybe I'll play with going in and out, but I just don't want to be that rigid. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
With the cancer patients, the ketosis state, was that purely in relation to being in chemotherapy treatment, or was that in relation to the cancer cells themselves? Do you know?
I think it was related to the chemotherapy treatment. I think the result of the chemotherapy treatment was better if they fasted previously.
And that makes sense, because they're opening it up for a different absorption process. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's the thing. I would say if you felt like you wanted to try your ketosis for a little while to see how it goes, then go for it. If you feel like it's better, I think that the lower carb and the more vegetables, because you can go just at a Mother's Day brunch and have 3 plates of vegetables and then come back and still feel hungry.
Well, I think what you're talking about, coming from my personal standpoint with a number of issues, your type of diet to me is incredibly healthy. Whereas the keto concept, like if you're talking about just, body fat type of situation, that's one thing. But if you're talking heart disease and other internal health items, to me, it seems like the keto diet, or at least in the way that a lot of people are interpreting the keto diet, which can be the issue as well.
Right.
These high fats and things like that, that's counterproductive to other health issues, in a different direction. So that really kind of turns me off of it. And again, it could be because of misinterpretations of it versus the pure interpretation of it. Whereas the type of nutrition plan you're discussing is kind of healthy on all fronts. Yes, you're keeping the fat down, and yes, you're keeping yourself lean, but you're also not putting yourself at a higher risk with higher fats, with heart disease and other items.
Yeah. And that's kind of my goal, right? I mean, that's ultimately
full health, right?
Yeah.
Not just like A, B, or C. You want the whole alphabet.
That's right. Yeah. Christine, yes, I am. So that's exactly right. So she asks, am I following more of a paleo diet? Yeah, pretty much. I would say that I'm like, and it's funny because you guys know who Mark Sisson is. Mark Sisson is the paleo blueprint guy, and Primal Kitchen, if you've ever seen, he has now avocado mayonnaise. Anyway, he's a local Malibu guy, and he's been around for years. He's been writing Mark's Daily Apple. It's a blog, and there's a lot of great information on there. I'm actually working with him on a couple things, but he helped me get through the change from my transition. And he's like a paleo expert for sure. And I was talking to his wife, and I said, I'm kind of like a paleo pescatarian, or like a pescatarian paleo person, right? Because I don't really do meats. Most people think paleo is a lot of meat, but I don't do meat, but I do fish and I do eggs. So, but I really don't do any grains at all. So for me, it's basically kind of, vegetarian paleo almost, like a pescatarian paleo. So yes, Christine, that's correct.
Ted, thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? You answer, it's like I said in the beginning, there's so much information out there, and we read one thing and then we read something else. So it was so what's the word? I don't know, refreshing, inspiring to hear from someone that's been in the industry so long, and that you're this premier athlete, and I really thank you for your time. I really do.
Oh yeah, for sure. My pleasure, you guys, and thanks for inviting me into your group. I hope that it continues to go well. And
next week we have you, Ted. We're working out with you next week. I said, get ready for Ted.
Yeah, right.
Ted, I love your week, and I just told Laura, I think it was last night, that I absolutely love, and now knowing your full background, I understand where it's coming from, because it kind of hit a lot of check marks in my boxes. I love the way you get into the physiology.
Oh, cool. Oh, good.
Those little physiology tidbits are right up my alley. They make me very happy. So keep those coming.
You got it.
I love that you do it in a bathing suit, which is
right.
I'm telling you, my husband did the workout, and he's like, all right, I can do it. This guy's in his bathing suit. I can do this.
That's funny. Yeah, and I'll check in with you guys, and I'll just keep, because I check my notifications, so I see when you guys are posting in your Facebook group. So I'll keep in there, and please feel free to use me as a resource. When it's over or not. I mean, just find me on social media, Teddy McDonald on Instagram, and the fan page on Facebook. But in the group, friend me. That's totally fine. I still have. I'm not like, well, sorry, I have too many friends now, I can't accept anybody. I still have plenty of space for friends in my life.
Can I ask one last question? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
So as you're talking about all the different carbs, one thing I noticed is that if I don't plan ahead, I can end up eating a lot of carbs on this 3-week yoga retreat, because if I have the oatmeal for breakfast, and then I have, I don't know, you know the meal plan, but if I don't look at it closely, I can end up eating a lot of carbs in a day. So do you feel like we need to be mindful of that as we're planning our day?
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would. I mean, if I were going to follow this to a T, there are some things that I wouldn't do.
Okay.
And I can't pick them off. I mean, you have a snack, an avocado snack is like, that's amazing, right? And you have but this here, which is a quinoa bowl with sweet potatoes and beets I might just do more. Like I might do the bowl on top, not the bowl on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So the bowl on top has the sweet potatoes and the beets. The bowl on the bottom includes quinoa. I might nix the quinoa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'm all for just doing those little kinds of tweaks to help, and then if you're really counting and you said, well, this day I'm going to do the oatmeal, but I'm not going to do the quinoa in the bowl. But then the next time you could reverse it and then, have some berries for breakfast and then do the quinoa in the bowl. Right. So you can do stuff like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. You guys are ahead of the game for even thinking about this stuff. Right.
There's a lot of thinkers in this group, Ted.
Yeah. all you got to do is look around, right? I live in a friggin' bubble.
Yeah.
I'm in Malibu and I'm looking around my yoga class. I'm like, there's nobody who needs my help here.
Yeah.
I mean, they do.
Come to New York and Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know when we're supposed to be there, but I was supposed to go. This is horrible. I have a friend who had a tragedy in his family, so we're heading to Florida next week. That's why I was all touch and go. I was trying to get to you guys for the test group, but it didn't happen. But we'll probably be there this year. And my aunt, so my parents both passed away back in 2005 and 2007, but my aunt lives in Farmingdale.
Oh,
so whenever
that's
we
right
go back,
me,
we're always out in Farmingdale. And then my brothers are all in New York City, so we're always out there kind of up and around.
Okay.
So hopefully that'll happen.
Some of us are on Long Island, like I'm in Huntington, which is not that far from Farmingdale.
Yeah, it's great.
Not that far. All right, Ted, thank you again so much. I'm actually going to put I'm going to look for your wife's blog and I'll put her link in the group.
Great.
This way, we can all read it. And I so appreciate you, giving your time. I know it's family time, so I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I'm actually recording this, so I'll put it in the group and I'll put it on YouTube and.
Oh, perfect.
And I'll tag you. So if you want to,
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and if you guys, my wife's pretty good. If you wanted her in the group, I'm sure she would be happy to get in there. So.
Absolutely. I'll make you an admin if you want to add her. That would be wonderful. We'd love to.
Oh, sure. Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. Thanks so much, you guys, and good luck and keep it up. And I look forward to. So are you guys on the schedule that Monday starts my week?
Starts Ted. We are going with you, Ted, on Monday.
Yes.
Good week.
Take our picture.
That's right. I can't wait. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing what happens to you on Monday.
and if you want to do another round, like you even get deeper, like you could do another round of this and still get something like even more out of it. That's what I'm.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, for sure. I've been doing yoga. It's actually been more than 10 years. It's been since I've been teaching for 15, 16, practicing for almost 20, and I still, you need it. It's just something for me that's now medicine for me.
Yeah. I love it.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Thanks so much.
You, Ted.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, guys.